part of what some people reacted to with the Eternals is the idea of its kind of wokeness. To be honest, with a lot of the Marvel stuff and a lot of the Disney stuff in general, I think the woke aspects of the movie are a lot more marketing and sort of puffery around the movie than really actually in the movie. And I think in this case, it doesn't really get represented very well. And what is there is what I think your hard left people would call performative in a lot of ways. It's very superficial, very fake. So I mean, yes, the team in Eternals is like global representation of races and ethnicities and whatnot, but it doesn't really mean anything because they're all basically American.
Yep.
Or British. And I guess Kingo. But even then, Kumail Nanjiani is just an American at this point. I mean, it's not. So all this kind of stuff, I just feel like is way more on paper than it is. You know, it
has nothing. Yeah, I mean, they could all look the same. The story would still be.
Yeah, it'd be basically the same. So, yeah, right. Exactly. I think that's actually probably the best way to say it is that their cultures, their ethnicities, races, whatever. Like, if you had swapped them all out in this case, it wouldn't have made any difference to the story. Their characters would have still been incredibly thin, and you still would have barely known anything about them, and they still would have had their various power sets and whatever, and it just wouldn't have mattered. But I do think Hollywood tries to do this a lot, and obviously they spend a lot of effort on marketing their products this way and trying to embed a lot of the stuff in here. Paul, you were going to talk. I actually don't even think we got into it that much in the Eternals discussion about the way that this presented some historical events, in particular the Aztecs versus Spaniards, and also World War II. As well, and I think those are the two instances in this movie that kind of brings that kind of woke sort of mentality forward, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, so this Eternals had two basically flashpoints where the Eternals came to grips with humanity's darker sides, and the first one was the Spanish conquering the Aztecs, and the second one was after the U.S. nuked Hiroshima.
Right.
And so my initial reaction was, of course, they picked those two.
The worst two events in human history are European conquest.
Yep.
And the U.S. In war.
Right. The war where we were fighting against
Imperial Japan and Nazis and
people that were committing genocide.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yep.
I'm sure the Chinese market would look. Okay, so
well, actually, that's a weird one because on the one hand, China's probably pretty happy about seeing a scene where Japan gets roasted, but on the other hand,
man,
but
it's not.
But I wouldn't consider myself
torn between hating the U.S. and hating Japan.
Right,
it's a weird.
So I mean, I'm like a history buff-ish type of thing. I don't spend as much time as I'd like reading history, but like I know enough about the Aztec and Spanish conflict that the way it was portrayed in the movie was just completely wrong, and a lot of times it's just portrayed wrong in school and just common history. But the idea that was so different than what was happening for thousands of years prior, and then fast forwarding to World War II. The dropping of the nuke, obviously it's a very new technology and different, but it's suddenly way worse than what was literally happening at the exact same time.
Yeah, so that scene, by the way, is really the purpose of that scene is to show the moment where Phastos, who is the sort of techno genius power of the team,
he can move his hands.
He can do things and technology.
He can tinker. He can build it.
Well, I also you like all of these characters are just slightly modified from various mythologies. So Hephaestus, for example, in Greek mythology is the blacksmith who creates all of the magical weapons and all that kind of stuff. But Anyway, Festus decides he's done with the world. He's done, which, by the way, he wasn't supposed to do in the first place. He was never supposed to actually interfere with any of these things. And finally, I'm supposed to feel bad.
Did he say that I made this technology not to kill people? I'm like, but the Manhattan Project was literally just to build a bomb.
That's correct. He really legitimately did make a lot of technology just to kill people, including participating in the man. I don't know if it was clear that he was part of it, that specific thing, but I think he was saying that he got the ball rolling.
Gotcha.
For all this stuff. In any case, that was his moment to see the atrocities of mankind and what his technology has wrought. But yet he did not seem to be very concerned, for example, about the gassing of people in concentration camps.
Well, I mean, just take a look at Wheels. How many people have Wheels killed over the thousands of years after he gave us the technology?
But again, that's,
I can't do that.
It's different, Paul.
It's different.
It's different.
It's different.
Trust me, promise.
No.
Definitely.
But let's to the point of the question though, like how did this happen or what caused it to become so woke? I mean, like I did a video on the video that I did on Hollywood's favorite trope, it's just business. That I think that part of that kind of gets into this because there is just a whole territory of the movie industry that has long been very anti-capitalist, anti-market, anti-business, a lot of that kind of thing. And I think that kind of plays into this a little bit because I think that there's a lot of overlap between that and, critical theory and, sort of postmodern critiques of capitalism and all of those things that sort of get baked into academia that kind of get into here. I also, I think I've told this story before, but when I was at South by Southwest, and I think it was 2015 or 2017, it was Jill Soloway's talk. I think I've talked about this before, where she basically, she had a thing. Jill Soloway created Transparent, the Amazon Prime series, and a couple other things. And she was giving a keynote, and she had everybody stand up, all the women in the room stand up, and she played a video about basically showing all of what in her mind was like the life of a young woman and what a young woman gets told as they're growing up by society, by their parents, by teachers, whatever. And it's all, honey, you can't do this, you can't, whatever. And it's honestly, it didn't really reflect reality at all. But then she had all the men in the room stand up, which I did. And, and it was the polar opposite of that. So in her mind, like all women everywhere in the United States and probably the rest of the Western world get told that they are just need to be seen and not heard, and that basically it's 1832 and women are best, barefoot in the kitchen and that's it, and nobody ever says anything else. Meanwhile, men are told that they can go over and take over the world and whatever. And it was really insulting on both sides. Like on both sides, it made it seem like women were just completely incompetent and just at the mercy of a horrible society, and men at the same time were these horrible oppressors, but we were also being oppressed ourselves by society's, various pressures to whatever. None of it reflected the way that I grew up or what I was told growing up. None of it reflected anything that you can see in public schools or anywhere else. But she had this idea of what she called the topple principles, and topple being topple the patriarchy and topple capitalism is literally part of it. If you go to her website, she explains what these are. Topple itself is like an acronym for some set of principles that she wants every film to adopt. And regardless of whether or not she was specifically successful at getting people to sign her pledge or whatever, because she had a literal, sign the pledge and whatever it is. A lot of these companies have done almost everything that she's asked for, which is basically we're committed to hiring more, diversity, equity, and inclusion people. We're committed to hiring more of these specific races, genders, sexualities, whatever, all that kind of stuff. So the focus had become, much as it has, I think, in other areas of corporate life in America and Europe especially, finding the right skin color of employee and finding the right gender of employee and giving special opportunities, privileges, etc. to some groups and kind of denigrating the identity of other groups, right? And it's been going on for about a decade now, and it's been rising for about a decade in a pretty serious